I need you to stay with me through this story, not because it is comfortable. It is not comfortable. It is the most uncomfortable thing I have ever put into words, and I have been putting things into words my entire life. But I need you to stay because the end of this story is not what you think it is from the beginning. And the thing I learned, the specific, permanent, life-altering thing, I learned in the months after the night I am going to tell you about is something I believe with my whole heart that someone listening to this needs to hear. So stay. Please. My name is Caroline Marsh. I am 37 years old. I was married to my husband David for 11 years. We met at 23, married at 26, and built a life together in Portland, Oregon that looked, from the outside and from most angles on the inside, like exactly what both of us had wanted. A house we loved. A daughter named Lily who was 8 when this story happened and is 11 now. Work that mattered to both of us. David was an architect. I ran a small nonprofit focused on literacy programs in underserved schools. A social life that was warm and genuine. Date nights. Sunday mornings with coffee and newspapers, and the specific, comfortable quiet of two people who have been beside each other long enough to not need to fill every silence. I loved my husband. I want to say that clearly because it is the truth and because it matters to everything that comes after. I loved him completely. Not blindly. Not without seeing his flaws. He was disorganized. He procrastinated on things that mattered. He had a temper that he managed most of the time and did not manage sometimes. I saw all of those things. I also saw his kindness, his intelligence, the way he was with Lily, present and patient and genuinely interested in the specific person she was becoming rather than some general idea of a child. The way he looked at me across a room sometimes. The way he held my hand without being asked. I loved him, and he was living a second life for 3 years. If you are new here, please subscribe right now and drop your country and local time in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you all the way back. The first sign was not what you would expect. Not lipstick. Not a strange number. Not the cliches of betrayal that fill movies and novels, and that I had always told myself I would notice immediately because I was perceptive and I paid attention. The first sign was a Wednesday afternoon in February when I came home from work an hour earlier than usual because a meeting had been canceled, and I found my husband sitting in the kitchen. Just sitting. Not reading. Not on his phone. Just sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water in front of him looking at nothing. He heard me come in and he turned and smiled. The right smile. The real smile. But for just a moment before he turned, just a fraction of a second, he had the expression of someone interrupted in the middle of something internal. Something large. Something he had not chosen to surface from. I filed it. The way I filed things that I did not know what to do with yet. Over the following months I noticed more, not dramatic things. Small calibrations. The way he held his phone slightly differently in certain situations, not hiding it exactly but angled in a specific way that I had not noticed before. The way certain evenings he was present with a particular intensity that was almost like an overcorrection, as though he was being very deliberately here rather than simply being here. Business trips that were slightly more frequent than they had been the year before. Each with a reasonable explanation and a specific quality to the explanation that I could not articulate at the time but that I understand now was the quality of something prepared. I was not suspicious. I want to be precise about that. I was noticing. There is a difference. Suspicion has a direction. It is moving toward a conclusion. Noticing is simply paying attention. I was paying attention without knowing what I was paying attention to. Then I found the email. It was not snooping. I want to be clear about that, not to defend myself. I have no need to defend myself in this story, but because the how of it matters to the specific way it landed. I was using David's laptop to print a document for work because my printer was out of ink. His email was open on the browser. I was not reading his email. I was navigating to the print function, and a notification appeared, a name I did not recognize. A subject line that was 3 words that I will not repeat here because they do not need to be repeated to tell this story. But 3 words that, in the specific context of a subject line from a name I did not recognize arriving in my husband's email, told me everything I needed to know to understand. That the noticing I had been doing for months had been noticing something real. I sat down at the desk. I read the email, then I read the thread. It was part of, I do not know how long I sat there. Long enough that when I looked up the light in the room had changed. The afternoon had moved while I was sitting still. I printed the document I had come to print. I went back to my office. I sat at my desk for the rest of the afternoon and I did what I do when something is too large to process immediately. I worked. I answered emails. I had a call about a grant proposal. I was, to all external appearances, completely functional. Inside I was doing the specific, careful work of someone who has just found out that the ground they are standing on is a different shape than they believed. Not falling. Not collapsing. Just recalibrating. The specific recalibration of someone who needs to understand what they are dealing with before they know what to do about it. I did not tell David that evening, or the evening after, or the evening after that. I needed to know more before I said anything. And I needed to decide what knowing more would require. I hired a private investigator, not immediately. I spent 2 weeks not hiring one. Going about my life, being his wife, sitting across from him at dinner, putting Lily to bed, making love, being, from the outside and from where David was standing, entirely normal. I was not normal. I was in the middle of the most sustained and deliberate act of self-containment I have ever managed. Every morning I woke up and made a decision to wait until I had something complete, something I could look at in full before I did anything. Investigator's name was James. He was 60 years old and had been doing this work for 30 years, and when I sat across from him in his office and told him what I needed, he did not react with anything other than professional focus. I appreciated that more than I can say. He came back to me 6 weeks later. The woman's name was Mara. She was 31 years old. She lived in Seattle, 3 hours from Portland, close enough to be accessible, far enough to be separate. She was a graphic designer. She was, from the photographs and the documentation James provided, beautiful in a very specific way that I had to sit with for a long time before I understood what I was feeling about it. Not comparison. Something more complicated than comparison. The relationship had been going on for approximately 3 years. The business trips to Seattle. David worked with a Seattle-based firm on several projects, which had provided the structure within which the relationship had existed, were the primary mechanism. She did not know he was married. I learned this from an email. David had told her he was separated, that he and his wife were living separately and working toward a divorce. He had told her this from the beginning. She believed him. I sat with all of this for 3 days. Then I called David and told him I needed to speak with him. That evening, that Lily was going to a friend's house for a sleepover that we had arranged 2 weeks earlier. He said of course. He did not know. There was nothing in his voice that said he knew. I need to tell you about that evening carefully, because it is the center of this story and I want to describe it as precisely as I can. We sat in the living room. The house was quiet without Lily. David sat across from me, with the open expression of someone who has not yet been told what is happening, and is not yet on guard. I placed James's report on the coffee table between us. David looked at it. Then he looked at me. I said, I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. Tonight. I already know most of it. But I need to hear it from you. The specific quality of his face in that moment is something I cannot fully describe. It was the face of a man whose entire constructed reality has just collapsed simultaneously, with the recognition that the person across from him has known for longer than he knew. He told me everything. Not defensively, not with justification, with the specific, stripped quality of someone who has run out of constructed narrative and is left with only the plain facts. 3 years, Seattle, Mara, the lie about the separation, the lie about the impending divorce, the trips, the specific architecture of a parallel life. He told me all of it. When he finished, the room was very quiet. I said, does she know you have a daughter? He said no. I said, does she know anything real about your life? He said no, almost nothing. I said, then she is not the issue. She is someone you lied to. She is not someone you chose over me. She is someone you built a fiction for because you were not willing to be honest with yourself about what you actually wanted. He looked at me. What do you actually want, David? I said. Not what you have been managing. What do you actually want? He was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, I don't know. And that was the most honest thing he had said to me in 3 years. We did not end the marriage that night. I want to tell you that because I think people expect that a story like this resolves in one direction or another, and it did not. Not immediately. What happened instead was the longest and most difficult conversation of my life. Not that evening was just the first layer. But over the weeks that followed, in sessions with a couples therapist and in our kitchen and in the car and in the specific, relentless way that a marriage reckons with something this size when both people are still in the room. David told Mara the truth. He did this on his own, at my request, without me present. He called me afterward and told me what he had said and what she had said. She had not known. Her grief at learning. The truth was real and I had complicated feelings. About that, feelings that I do not think I owe anyone a full accounting of, but that I will say involved more empathy than I expected. She had been lied to. In a different way than I had been lied to. But lied to. I thought about that a great deal. I want to tell you what happened in therapy. Not all of it. There are things that belong to the room where they were said. But the shape of what I understood. David had not, as I had initially believed, stopped loving me. This was not a love story with someone else that had replaced ours. It was something more complicated and in some ways more painful than that. He had been afraid. Not of me, of himself, of what he could not articulate to me about what he needed that he had not found a way to ask for. He had spent 3 years finding it somewhere else rather than finding the words to ask for it at home. This does not excuse it. I want to be very clear about that. What he did was a profound betrayal. The lying. The 3 years of living into realities. The risk he had placed on our daughter's family without her knowledge or consent. None of it is excused by fear or by need or by anything else. But, understanding it differently from how I initially understood it changed what I decided to do with it. We separated for 8 months, not filed for divorce. Separated. David moved into an apartment 20 minutes away. He saw Lily every other week and on Thursdays. I had the house. I had Lily most of the time. I had the specific, strange experience of being in my own life in a way I had not been since I was 23. I want to tell you something about those 8 months that I have not told many people. They were some of the most important months of my life. Not because I enjoyed them. I did not enjoy them, not in the simple sense. They were painful and lonely and full of the specific grief of a marriage that might be ending in a future that was uncertain in ways I had never planned for. But they were also the months in which I understood, fully and completely for the first time, what I was. I was capable. I had always been capable, but I had been capable within the structure of a marriage for so long that capable had become invisible to me. In those 8 months, capable became visible again. I ran the nonprofit. I raised Lily through the hardest thing she had ever experienced with more steadiness than I knew I had. I rebuilt relationships with friends I had let recede during the years of building the marriage. I sat with myself in the evenings in a house that was quiet in a different way than it had been quiet before, and I learned that the quiet was livable, more than livable. I was okay. I was. In ways that surprised me. Genuinely okay. That understanding that I was okay and could be okay and did not require the marriage to be okay changed what I decided to do about the marriage, not because I no longer wanted it, but because I wanted it from a different place than I had wanted it before. I wanted it from a place of choice rather than a place of need. There is a difference. It matters enormously. David and I began seeing the therapist together again in month 6 of the separation. Not to decide, to understand what the marriage had been. What it would need to be different. What each of us was willing to do and willing to change and willing to hold. Those sessions were the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than the night I put the report on the coffee table. Harder than the 8 months alone. Because they required me to be fully honest about my own contribution to a marriage that had developed enough of a gap in it that David had filled the gap with something terrible. My contribution was not the betrayal. I want to be absolutely clear about that. Nothing I did or did not do caused David to do what he did. The choice was his and the responsibility is his, and nothing mitigates that. But a marriage is to people. And two people can love each other and still develop gaps between them. And I had seen the gaps, I had felt them in ways I had not fully examined, and I had filed them in the place where I filed things I did not know what to do with yet. I had not asked. He had not said. And in the space between what was not asked and what was not said, something had grown that neither of us had intended. I am not telling you this to distribute the fault. The fault sits where it sits. I am telling you this because understanding my own part in the marriage as it was, not the betrayal. The marriage is what made it possible for me to decide whether I wanted the marriage as it could be. David and I renewed our marriage in month 9. Not a ceremony. Not a grand gesture. A conversation in the therapist's office in which we both said what we were choosing and what we were committing to, and what was non-negotiable and what we were willing to build differently. I said, if you ever reach the place again where you cannot say what you need, and I know that place exists because you have been there, I need you to come to me before you go anywhere else. That is the only thing I am asking. Come to me first, he said. I will come to you first. I promise. He has kept that promise. We have been back together for 2 years. I want to tell you what those 2 years have been like, not because I expect you to believe me, but because this story deserves its full truth. They have been hard. Not as hard as the 8 months, but hard in the ongoing way of two people rebuilding something that was damaged at its foundation. There are moments when I feel it, the specific residue of 3 years of being lied to. Moments when his phone is in a different room than he is and something in my body responds before my mind can catch it. Moments when a business trip is announced and I have to breathe through the specific fear that is not rational but is also not entirely irrational. David knows about those moments. He does not manage them for me. I am not his project and I do not want to be managed. But he is present for them in the way of someone who understands that he caused them, and that the cost of causing them is being present while they are paid. Lily knows we went through something difficult. She is 11 and she is perceptive in the way of children who have been inside something hard. We have not told her the specifics. She has asked questions that we have answered as honestly as her age allows. She asked me once if I was happy. I thought about it honestly before I answered. I said, yes. In a way that is more real than it was before. Because I know now that I chose this. I was not just in it. I chose it. She thought about that. Then she said, I think that is better. She is 11. She is right. I want to tell you the thing that I said at the beginning I needed you to hear. The night I put that report on the coffee table, I was terrified. Not of what David had done. By then I had known for months and I had processed the first layer of it. I was terrified of what it meant for who I was. Because the story I had told myself about my marriage, about us, about what we were, had been a story I was inside. And when you are inside a story, you cannot fully see it. You can only see from within it. The betrayal forced me outside the story. And from outside it I saw things I had not seen from inside. I saw the gaps I had not examined. I saw the ways I had been capable and kept that capability largely invisible. I saw the ways I had stopped asking questions I should have asked. I saw the ways I had built my sense of security on the marriage rather than on myself, and I saw, most importantly, that I was okay. That the woman outside the story was okay. Was more than okay. Was someone capable and strong and worth knowing completely. I had to lose the story to find her. I would not wish what David did on anyone. Not on any marriage. Not on any woman. The pain of it is real and it does not fully go away. And I do not want to make it sound simpler than it is, but I will tell you this, the woman who walked out of those 8 months was different from the woman who walked in. She knew who she was, she knew she was okay without the marriage and chose the marriage anyway. She chose from strength instead of fear, and she has never confused those two things since. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. Before you go, I want to ask you something real. Have you ever had something taken from you that, in the taking, showed you something about yourself you had not fully seen? Have you ever been forced outside a story you were inside and discovered that the outside view was more honest than the inside one? And have you ever chosen something, really chosen it, from strength, knowing you would be okay without it, and understood that the choosing made it different from everything that came before? Drop the word chose in the comments if this story reached something real in you. And if you are new here, subscribe. Every single day I share a new story about family, about marriage, about truth, and about the people who found themselves in the wreckage of something broken and decided that what they found was worth keeping. I will see you in the next one. Kayla's Dark Truth.